The dust on Kepler 442c had a peculiar way of settling into every crevice of expensive archaeological equipment, which Dr. Elena Vasquez found oddly appropriate given how thoroughly this dig was about to complicate everyone's understanding of galactic history. She brushed sediment from what appeared to be a remarkably well-preserved hilt, its metal composition already confusing 3 different spectrometers. "Professor, you might want to see this," called Zixthara from the southern excavation grid, her mantis-like appendages delicately extracting something from the stratified layers. The Valkyrie researcher had been skeptical of this entire expedition from the beginning, convinced that finding pre-contact human artifacts was about as likely as discovering that the hegemony had developed a sense of humor. Eleanor approached the find with the careful enthusiasm of someone who had spent 15 years watching promising discoveries crumble under proper scrutiny. What Zixthara held defied several established theories about human technological development. "That's definitely terrestrial steel," Elena murmured, accepting the blade fragment. "But the dating puts it here, 3,000 years before humans supposedly developed interstellar travel." "Contamination," suggested Dr. Morgan, the expedition's hegemony-appointed oversight officer. His blue-scaled head tilted with the kind of patronizing angle that suggested he'd already filed his report, concluding this was all very interesting, but ultimately irrelevant. "From what?" "The nearest human settlement is 47 light-years away, and they've been there for exactly 63 years. Eleanor's voice carried the particular edge that academics developed when dealing with bureaucrats who confuse authority with expertise. The conversation was interrupted by the distinctive whine of military transports entering atmosphere. Elena looked up to see 3 hegemony cruisers descending with the subtle grace of falling anvils, their weapons systems already painting the dig site with targeting lasers. "Dr. Vasquez," announced Commander Thektar as he emerged from the lead transport, his ceremonial battle crown glinting in the alien sun. "You will cease excavation immediately. This site has been classified as strategically significant." Elena held up the blade fragment, watching how the light caught its edge. "Strategically significant how? It's a historical curiosity at best. Human military artifacts predating your species' known spacefaring capabilities represent a potential security concern." Thektar's voice carried the weight of someone who had clearly practiced this speech. "The hegemony cannot allow destabilizing historical revisionism." "Historical revisionism?" Eleanor laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both academic and dangerous. "Commander, do you know what this represents?" "Primitive metallurgy," Thektar replied dismissively. "Your species' early attempts at weapon crafting before you developed more civilized approaches to conflict resolution." Elena's expression shifted in a way that made several of the alien researchers take unconscious steps backward. "Commander, you're absolutely right. This is primitive, which is precisely why it's terrifying." She walked toward the excavation's central pit, where the morning's work had revealed what appeared to be a complete weapon. The sword, because that's clearly what it was, rested in carefully preserved stasis, its blade reflecting light in ways that suggested metallurgy far more sophisticated than anyone had expected. "You know what your species considers advanced warfare?" Elena asked, addressing the growing crowd of alien observers. "Energy weapons, plasma fields, quantum disruptors, very elegant, very civilized." She reached into the stasis field and lifted the sword, testing its weight with movements that suggested considerably more familiarity with such implements than a xenoanthropologist should possess. "This," she continued, holding the blade at an angle that made several hegemony soldiers nervously adjust their weapons, "represents something your species never developed. The art of making killing personal." "Professor," Zixthara warned, her compound eyes reflecting genuine concern, Perhaps we should... No, let her continue, Commander Thektar interjected, his confidence clearly outweighing his wisdom. I'm curious to see where this primitive demonstration leads. Elena's smile could have cut through the morning air. Commander, I appreciate your scientific curiosity. Tell me, what would it take to convince you that humans deserve full membership in galactic civilization? Your species would need to demonstrate capabilities beyond academic theory and agricultural efficiency, Thektar replied. Military prowess, strategic thinking, the ability to contribute meaningfully to galactic security. And if I could demonstrate those capabilities using only what we've found here today? The commander's laugh was shared by several of his subordinates. Dr. Vasquez, you're a scholar studying dead civilizations. What could you possibly demonstrate that would impress the hegemony military? Eleanor hefted the sword, feeling its balance, remembering training that, officially, didn't exist. Commander, you're about to discover that human weakness is considerably more dangerous than you've been led to believe. The archaeological site fell silent, except for the distant hum of military equipment and the whisper of wind through alien vegetation. Elena stood in the center of the excavation, holding a 3,000-year-old weapon, surrounded by representatives of 12 different species who had just made the mistake of underestimating what humans considered civilized behavior. "Shall we begin?" she asked. Within minutes, Commander Thektar had transformed the dig site into an impromptu amphitheater, his engineering core establishing a perimeter that somehow managed to feel both protective and imprisoning. Elena suspected this was intentional. The hegemony rarely missed opportunities to demonstrate their organizational superiority. "Before we proceed," announced Dr. Kethmori, the expedition's military historian, "I should note that hegemony combat doctrine has evolved beyond primitive blade work for approximately 4 millennia. Modern warfare focuses on tactical efficiency and minimal casualties." Elena began moving through what appeared to be warm-up exercises, the ancient blade flowing through patterns that seemed to have their own gravitational pull. "Dr. Kethmori, how many casualties did the hegemony suffer in the Proxima Rebellion?" "Approximately 47,000 over 6 months, Kethmori replied, clearly puzzled by the question's relevance. "And the Centauri pacification campaign?" 63,000 across 8 months of operations. Elena paused mid-movement, the sword's point resting against the excavated ground. Fascinating. In Earth's medieval period, a single human swordsman could personally account for dozens of opponents in a single engagement. Your modern efficiency seems to require considerably more administrative overhead. Commander Thektar's throat sacs inflated with what Elena had learnt to recognize as condescension. "Dr. Vasquez, personal combat skills are irrelevant in contemporary warfare. Victory depends on strategy, technology, and coordinated logistics." "Of course," Elena agreed, resuming her movements. The blade began tracing more complex patterns, each motion flowing into the next with mechanical precision. Which is why human military development took a fundamentally different approach. She gestured toward the excavation walls, where morning light revealed additional artifacts emerging from the carefully documented layers. "Notice the stratification here. These items weren't buried randomly. They represent a deliberate cache. Someone placed them here with specific intentions." Zixthara approached one of the exposed sections, her analytical instincts overriding her growing unease. "The preservation is extraordinary, almost as if they were meant to be found." "Precisely," Elena confirmed, her breathing remaining steady despite the increasingly complex swordwork. "But found by whom? And why preserve weapons that your species considers obsolete?" The crowd of observers had grown substantially. Word of the demonstration had spread through whatever communication networks the various species maintained, drawing researchers, military analysts, and diplomatic observers from across the system. Elena noted several individuals whose uniforms she didn't recognize, representatives of civilizations that normally avoided hegemony space. The human approach to warfare, Elena continued, transitioning into what any medieval scholar would recognize as advanced European longsword techniques, never abandoned the principle of individual lethality. We simply scaled it. Dr. Morgan stepped forward, his blue scales shifting color in what Elena had learned indicated analytical focus. Scaled it how? Personal combat skills cannot compete with modern military technology. Elena's response involved a sequence of movements that made the ancient blade disappear and reappear in positions that defied several observers' ability to track visually. Dr. Morgan, when your species developed energy weapons, did you abandon strategy? Of course not. Strategy adapted to incorporate new capabilities. When you developed faster-than-light travel, did you abandon navigation? Navigation became more complex, not less relevant. Elena smiled, and several alien observers later reported that this expression had been considerably more unsettling than her sword work. When humans developed advanced technology, we didn't abandon the fundamental principles of making our enemies dead. We simply became more creative about implementation. She moved toward a section of the excavation that had been cordoned off pending further analysis. Commander Thektar, you mentioned demonstrating capabilities. Would you be willing to provide some volunteers for a practical exercise? The commander's confidence remained intact, though several of his subordinates exchanged glances that suggested they were reconsidering their career choices. What kind of exercise? Nothing dangerous, Elena assured him, her tone suggesting that her definition of danger might differ significantly from galactic norms. Simply a demonstration of human training methodologies versus contemporary hegemony combat doctrine. She lifted the sword again, this time holding it in a guard position that somehow managed to suggest both defensive readiness and imminent violence. After all, if humans are going to contribute meaningfully to galactic security, shouldn't we understand how our capabilities compare to established standards? The archaeological site had become something else entirely. A testing ground where 3,000 years of human military development was about to encounter the galaxy's current understanding of civilized warfare. Elena waited, sword ready, while alien civilizations discovered they had been making assumptions about human nature that were about to prove spectacularly incorrect. The first volunteer emerged from the hegemony ranks with the swagger of someone who had clearly never considered that academic challenges might involve actual physical risk. Lieutenant Vexel wore ceremonial combat armor that gleamed with the kind of polish that suggested it had never encountered genuine hostility. Standard non-lethal engagement protocols, Commander Thektar announced, activating a containment field around the designated combat area. Dr. Vasquez will demonstrate her historical techniques against contemporary training. Elena examined the energy barriers with professional interest. Fascinating technology. How does it handle kinetic impact? The field absorbs and redistributes force up to 17,000 newtons, Vexel explained, drawing his plasma sidearm with practiced confidence. More than sufficient for any primitive weapon system. Primitive, Elena mused, settling into a stance that made several military observers reach for their recording devices. Lieutenant, what's your standard engagement distance? Optimal effective range is 40 meters for precise targeting, Vexal replied, beginning the lateral movement patterns that hegemony doctrine emphasized for combat superiority. Elena nodded approvingly. Excellent tactical thinking. Stay at range, maintain situational awareness, use superior technology to neutralize threats before they can respond. She began walking directly toward him. Vexel fired twice, plasma bolts that should have ended the demonstration immediately. The containment field flared as it absorbed the energy, but Elena wasn't where the targeting system indicated she should be. She had moved during the targeting sequence, not faster than the weapon could track, but in directions that the automated systems hadn't anticipated. "Interesting," commented Dr. Yulia Surin, a human military attaché who had arrived with the most recent transport. "Lieutenant, you might want to adjust your engagement parameters." Vexel fired again, this time attempting to predict Elena's movement. The blast struck empty air while Elena closed the distance, with movements that seemed to flow around the weapon's targeting arc. "The human approach to combat," Eleanor explained conversationally, now within 10 meters of increasingly nervous Lieutenant, "emphasizes adaptability over standardization." Her next movement brought her inside the plasma weapon's minimum engagement distance. The sword's pommel connected with Vexal's weapon hand with clinical precision, sending the sidearm spinning away, while the alien officer stumbled backward into the containment field. "Lieutenant Vexal is eliminated," Elena announced, stepping back to center position. "Next volunteer?" The silence that followed was broken by urgent communications between various alien observers. Elena caught fragments of conversation in languages she recognized: tactical assessments, casualty projections, and what sounded like several species rapidly revising their intelligence estimates about human combat capabilities. "Perhaps a more experienced opponent," suggested Major Korthax, a hegemony special operations officer whose scars suggested considerably more practical experience than his predecessor. This engagement lasted 37 seconds. Elena's blade work during those 37 seconds would be analyzed by military academies across 12 star systems for the next several decades. The Major employed every advanced technique in hegemony close-quarters combat doctrine, supported by powered armor that enhanced both speed and strength to levels that should have overwhelmed any organic opponent. Elena treated the encounter as an educational opportunity, providing running commentary on human tactical adaptations while systematically dismantling 4,000 years of military evolution. "Notice how the armor's mobility enhancement creates predictable movement patterns," she observed, deflecting a strike that should have shattered the ancient blade. "Human combat training emphasizes exploiting technological dependencies." The demonstration concluded with Major Korthax immobilized by a technique that used his own armor's servo systems against him. By the fourth volunteer, word of the demonstration had reached military commands across 3 sectors. Elena found herself facing opponents with increasingly sophisticated equipment and training, each engagement broadcast to audiences who were beginning to understand that their assumptions about human military capabilities had been fundamentally incorrect. "Dr. Vasquez," interrupted Admiral Zethkri, her authority evident in the way other officers deferred to her presence. "These demonstrations are impressive, but individual combat skills remain irrelevant to modern warfare." Elena lowered her sword, breathing normally despite having just disabled a powered exoskeleton using leverage principles that predated interstellar travel. "Admiral, you're absolutely correct. Individual skills are meaningless without proper context." She gestured toward the excavation site where automated systems had been quietly working throughout the demonstrations. "Which is why I should mention that everything we've found here suggests this wasn't an isolated cache. Our survey data indicates similar deposits across 17 different worlds." The implication hit the assembled observers like a physical blow. Eleanor continued with the relentless cheerfulness of someone delivering news that would reshape galactic politics. "The interesting question isn't whether humans can fight. The question is why we've been so careful to make everyone think we couldn't." The communication networks lit up like a cascade failure across galactic infrastructure. Within 18 minutes, Eleanor's demonstration had reached the attention of intelligence agencies that normally required months to process routine diplomatic correspondence. The archaeological site had become the center of a galaxy-wide conversation that nobody had planned to have. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Zethkary's voice, carried the particular strain of someone whose worldview was undergoing real-time reconstruction. Are you suggesting that human military capabilities have been deliberately misrepresented? Elena cleaned the ancient blade with movements that suggested ritual significance. Admiral, I'm an anthropologist. I deal in cultural patterns, not military intelligence. But when you find identical weapon caches on worlds that haven't had contact with each other for millennia, you start wondering about the distribution network. Dr. Kethmori stepped forward, his analytical equipment capturing every detail of the sword's construction. The metallurgy alone represents technology that shouldn't exist. These alloys require manufacturing processes that predate known human industrial development by centuries. Unless, Elena suggested gently, human industrial development is considerably older than galactic records indicate. The assembled observers processed this statement with the kind of silence that typically preceded paradigm shifts. Elena used the moment to access her personal communication device, transmitting authorization codes that she had hoped never to need. Terra Command, this is Deep Survey 7. Authentication, Vasquez, Elena Maria. Authorization, Omega 77 Alpha. Request immediate activation of Operation Scholarly Concern. The response came through with crystal clarity. Dr. Vasquez, Operation Scholarly Concern is now active. All human assets in this sector are standing by for your direction. Elena smiled at the galaxy's representatives with the expression of someone who had just revealed that the game they thought they were playing had entirely different rules. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings, allow me to properly introduce myself. Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenoanthropologist, Harvard University Earth. Also Colonel Elena Vasquez, Terran Strategic Intelligence Deep Survey Division. The implications cascaded through the assembled crowd like a controlled demolition. Elena continued with the professional courtesy of someone explaining why everything they thought they knew was wrong. For the past 63 years, human expansion into galactic space has followed what our sociologists call the harmless academic protocol. We've presented ourselves as curious researchers, eager to learn from superior civilizations. We've been very careful to appear technologically dependent, militarily insignificant, and culturally naive. She gestured toward the excavation site, where automated systems had been quietly documenting everything. This site, and the 16 others like it, represent what we call archaeological insurance, evidence of human presence that predates our official first contact by several millennia. Commander Thektar found his voice first. That's impossible. Human faster-than-light travel was developed only 74 years ago. Human faster-than-light travel was revealed 74 years ago, Elena corrected. There's a considerable difference between development and disclosure. The communication networks were now carrying the demonstration to audiences across known space. Elena watched the data streams with satisfaction, noting which civilizations were requesting emergency security briefings and which were quietly repositioning their military assets. The question you're all asking, she continued, is why we maintained this deception. The answer is remarkably simple. We were buying time. She lifted the sword again, this time holding it in a position that suggested finality rather than threat. Every species that achieved interstellar travel did so through conquest, territorial expansion, or resource competition. When humans developed the capability, we discovered a galaxy already divided into stable power blocks. Admiral Zethkry's understanding was visible in the way her posture shifted from authority to calculation. "You've been conducting intelligence operations while posing as harmless academics." "We've been learning," Elena replied, "about your technologies, your military capabilities, your political structures, and your cultural assumptions. We've been mapping your trade routes, analyzing your strategic doctrines, and identifying your critical vulnerabilities." The archaeological site had become the center of a galactic intelligence crisis. Elena stood in the middle of it, holding a 3,000-year-old weapon that had just rewritten contemporary military theory. "The demonstration you've witnessed today isn't about proving human combat capabilities. It's about announcing that the evaluation period is over. Humanity has decided to participate in galactic civilization as equals, not supplicants." She returned the sword to its excavation position with ceremonial precision. "Admiral, Commander, distinguished colleagues, welcome to the new era of galactic politics. We hope you'll find the transition educational." The morning sun reflected off the blade's surface, illuminating an archaeological site that had become the location where the galaxy discovered that human weakness had been the most successful military strategy in interstellar history.